What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, today we're going to have some interesting conversations with a friend of mine. I want to know this. Is the Constitution something that Americans, not Americans, but Christians even need to know about? Sometimes people say, it's kind of idolatrous. We don't need to know stuff like that. You don't need it. Maybe we do need it. And I'm curious. I've got a friend here. We're going to ask about that. And that's going to lead into what I'm hoping is going to be a good conversation. I have questions about abortion, about all sorts of things, because we're sort of beginning to talk about this as this presidential election. It's only 2 years away and we're already talking about it. And so there's lots of questions about this. I think it's going to be super interesting. I'm ready to learn a lot because I got a lot of philosophical questions that I need to know. So let's jump in to a sweet episode of Cooper Stuff. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, I got one of my good friends here. This is my friend, Rick. Rick, say hello to all the Cooper Stuff peeps out here.
Man, I'm honored to be. I'm telling you, your podcast is the one I recommend to everybody if they want to know about freedom, theology. I mean, you're grounded on so many things. Anyway, I love your podcast. I share it with everybody I can. Look, I even redid my office so my paneling would match yours. I did all of that just to be prepared for today. Okay, maybe not. That might be fake news. But anyway, it's good to be with you, man.
Yeah, but I see you got Mel Gibson over your left shoulder there, it looks like, from The Patriot.
Yeah, I love that painting because it's the scene when he turns the battle, right? It's like everybody else is running away and hiding, and he's like, no, we're going to win this thing, and I'm going to lead the way. So it's courage. And the cool thing about courage is it begats courage. It's contagious. So the more we can be like that, the more I think other Christians will.
Absolutely. I also liked it because when you watch the movie, you find out that Mel Gibson's not actually the Patriot. It's his son who's the Patriot, right? The kind of,
it's my favorite movie of all time. It really is.
Oh, is it really? I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, I like that. I like how his son is the one who's kind of like believing and kind of, getting his dad into it. And then, of course, Mighty Mel. All right. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that, but real fast before I start asking you some questions, tell everybody who you are in case people aren't familiar with you. Rick Green, what you do a lot of things. Explain to us who you are, because I'm always tempted just to jump in straight to my questions, but people want to know that.
Yeah, man, I used to be a state rep in Texas. I got frustrated in the political world, just realizing how few people had conviction and really understood the principles of liberty and the biblical foundation that's required for a society to be successful. Success leaves clue. If you look at the greatest nation in history, there's a reason for that. There's a formula for that. And I wanted to start teaching that. So started Patriot Academy 23 years ago. We've been teaching young people in state capitals across the country. You came and shared with us last year. We have a Constitution Coach Program with 25,000 now coaches across the country teaching the Constitution and biblical perspective on the Constitution. And, I'm just a believer that everything we're dealing with that's negative, the evil marching across the country, it all grows in this petri dish called civic and biblical ignorance. And we can solve that. The good news is we can reverse that, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take us being willing to be salt and light and get in there and get engaged in our culture.
Civic and what? Civic
and biblical ignorance. That is the petri dish where bad government grows. And man, is it growing like crazy right now.
Well, you know what? I mean, I'm gonna have to borrow that line because I absolutely agree. I wish I could go back to my younger self and slap him for several reasons, but I wouldn't mind going back and slapping my younger self and be like, dude, you need to understand a little bit about civic government. Like, what does it even mean to be a citizen? Where do rights come from? I mean, the whole thing. Yeah. But I think that what I want to ask you is this. I think that there's a lot of people like the younger me, and don't worry, I don't want to slap anybody else. All right, it's just only me. All right. But I think there's a lot of people that are like the younger me, Christians, I think have good hearts before the Lord. I mean, I had a good heart. I wanted to live for Jesus in my generation. I didn't idolize America. I mean, I loved my country, but I didn't idolize America in some sort of like, way of like America is the kingdom of God or something confusing like that. I just wanted to live for Jesus and leave. That's not my problem. That's all, whatever. There's a lot of people like that. And so I guess what I want to start with is this, because you're a Constitution coach. Why do Christians need to understand? Do they need to understand the Constitution? And if they do need to, why?
Yeah, man. And first, I'll just be honest with you. I was the same way. High school, college, I hated history. I hated government. I slept through those classes, drooled on the desk. I was busy listening to Resban and Petra. So and later Skillet, but not at the time. I'm too old for that. Anyway, no, the stuff was kind of the same reason. It was like, how does this apply to my life? What do I care what happened in 1776 or even 1976? And it just didn't matter to me. I mean, it just wasn't important to me. And then I got into law school. And I started realizing, man, every decision a judge makes, right there in their opinion, you can see that their perception of history determines their philosophy today, and therefore their decision is going to impact us. And then the more I read my Bible, I realized he says over and over again, remember the former days, and the history is recounted for them over and over and over again. And then I started thinking about Jesus's command. He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And in America, we are Caesar. I mean, we don't live in the Roman Empire. We're in charge. And so we've been given this, not just a right, but a responsibility. This is a duty. This is the parable of the talents. He's given us these talents. And the question is, are we burying the talent of freedom, or are we working it? Are we multiplying it? And if we're burying it, we're the wicked and slothful servant. If we're using it and we're multiplying it, we're living it, then we're the good and faithful servant. And I just think for too long, I was that way. I ignored it. I buried it. And I think that's where most of the church is. We kind of thought, I want to be good and holy, so I'm going to go into ministry or whatever. I'm going to save souls, but I'm not going to be involved in government. Man, that's nasty business. Or business even is nasty. And we forgot the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. It's all his. Everything. I'm a country boy, so I kind of have a simple terms on everything. It's all his. And if we don't see God's principles in the arts or government or any of these areas, it's because we're not taking them there. We're not being ambassadors for Christ. We're not being salt and light. And the meat is spoiling. Without the salt, the meat spoils. Look around us, man. America is spoiling because the church kept the salt in the shaker. We have a warped view of the Great Commission. We actually think it means just get them to walk the aisle and fill out a card. It doesn't. It means make disciples of all nations and teach them to obey everything I commanded you. Well, he commanded a lot with regard to how to treat your neighbor, what society should look like. And we've ignored it for too long, and we're paying the price. And so is the rest of our country.
All right. I need to unpack like 17 things you said. 18. No, 18.
Hey, you know what? Your number was good, though, because there's 17 enumerated powers in the Constitution. That's it. They're doing 17,000 things they shouldn't. So stick with 17, not 18. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, see, I didn't even know that, but I must have known,
Yeah,
that's right. So let me actually, let me do this. Let me go to a sponsor, and then I want to ask you this question. Give me 1 second. Okay, I want to talk to you guys about something I feel very, very, very passionate about. And yeah, we're about to go there. This is about living a porn-free life. I said it. We got to talk about it because we have an issue, not just in American society. It is ripping America apart, but it's ripping a lot of people in the church apart too. I know people personally whose lives have been absolutely devastated by pornography. I know personal friends of mine who are married, whose marriages were ripped apart because of this addiction. And that's what it is. It's an addiction. The statistics I've read are absolutely shocking. Up to 70% of people in churches say they struggle with porn. 50% of ministers say that they struggle with porn. All right. The Bible says this: it was for freedom that Christ has set you free. You do not have to be a slave to porn. And I'm not interested in somebody saying, hey, guess what? I went 10 days free from porn. No, I want you to put it to death. And I believe you can do it. There's a company I got to tell you about. They are called Covenant Eyes. We just started a partnership with them. They've been doing this for 22 years, and they've helped 1.5 million people say goodbye to pornography forever. All right. Now, this is a Christian company, and they are passionate about helping people get rid of this thing once and for all with an accountability partner through grace and through accountability. And it's absolutely awesome. So here's what you got to do. Visit covenanteyes.com, enter the promo code Cooper. That's easy to remember. Hello, COOPER. So go to covenanteyes.com, enter the promo code Cooper. They're going to give you a free trial. All right, covenanteyes.com. They're going to give you 30 days free. Try it. See if it works. Now, listen, if you're somebody that struggles with pornography, I want to tell you this. Number one, you are not alone. A lot of people struggle with this. Number two, you do not have to be a slave. I believe in the work, the miracle working power of the Holy Spirit that will give you the strength and the power to put this to death. But you might need a little bit of help. And that's where Covenant Eyes comes in. Do yourself a favor. Check it out. covenanteyes.com. enter the promo code Cooper for a free 30-day trial. Okay, all right, this is the first thing. Explain what you mean. You just said we are Caesar, and I think that you need to break that down. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, in fact, during COVID, I mean, as soon as COVID hit and government went way outside its boundaries, and we did things we've never done in history, even in 1918 with Spanish flu, which was 25 times more deadly than COVID. We didn't do all this nonsense, but the excuse in the church was Romans 13, we're supposed to bow down and do whatever government says. And very few pastors, I mean, Rob McCoy and a handful of them said, yeah, but we're the government. So when we say obey government and what government says in America, it's different than the Roman Empire. We are the government. We, the people, are in charge. So the beauty of being a constitutional republic is that they work for us, meaning the public servants. They work for us, not the other way around. And it's actually kind of interesting, John. Everybody says you're a threat to democracy these days. And I say, praise God. Absolutely. The founders hated democracy. They called it mobocracy. They said that it would always end in violence and evil. We're a republic, not a democracy. Even better than that, we're a constitutional republic. And so all these people that say we're a threat to democracy, I say amen, because if we turn into a democracy, mob rule takes over. And so what God gave us in America, I believe, is a constitutional republic that we're responsible for. The citizens are ultimately not at the top. God's at the top. The founders said in 1776, they looked around the world and they said, every model of government in the world, power comes from God to the king, and then the king gives it to the people only as the monarch sees fit. Those 56 men in that rented room we now call Independence Hall, they turned that upside down. They said, power comes from God to the people, and then we create government right there in the Declaration, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, the governed, us, you, me, and everybody watching, they are in charge. And government only gets power, just power, if it's given by us. If we set up that government for one reason, what is it? To secure these rights, to protect our rights, not to provide for us, but to protect our rights. That's the only reason we have government, and it's our job to stand up and give consent or refuse consent. When we sit on the sidelines, believe me, government will take over more and more of your life, even when you didn't give it permission.
So do you think, I think this, and I think you probably do too, but you can expound on it. Have you noticed that? So what I hear some Christians saying, and again, I'm honestly not trying to demonize people. I mean, I disagree with them, but I do think a lot of people have good hearts when they say what I'm about to say. So they almost try to say, so if Rick Green, if you say, hey, we are Caesar, as you just said, that we are Caesar, we're supposed to be a threat to that because we have rights. The founders understood that, yada, 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 and we have a responsibility for that. Sometimes there are Christian people that will say that you're bad for saying that, almost like you don't really believe it. It's an illusion so you can keep hold of power or something. It's almost like they're twisting something really good and saying, yeah, that's just because you want to keep power. But a true Christian would be the servant of all. It's almost like they're not making a connection that when we stand up for our rights, we are standing up for everybody. It's not that. Right. It's almost like they think I'm being selfish, but we're standing up for everybody. Do you know what I mean? Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, it's the same as when people say Christians shouldn't defend themselves or use the Second Amendment or whatever, that somehow they're supposed to allow violence to happen because a Christian's supposed to turn the other cheek. It's a distortion of the scripture. We're actually supposed to defend the innocent. We're supposed to step in. We're supposed to lead. Jesus was not just the lamb. He was also the lion. And we've got this view right now that Christians are supposed to sit around and pet lambs all the time, when in fact, we're supposed to be the righteous are bold as a lion. We're supposed to be standing up, defending the innocent. We're actually supposed to step into leadership, because if we don't lead from a biblical perspective, people that don't have a biblical perspective are going to lead. And when people think that that's selfish or we're just power hungry, I always ask them, I'm like, well, do you want leaders that believe in treating your neighbor the way you want to be treated? Or do you want leaders that believe they should grab everything they can and hold on to power and be corrupt because, it's law of the tiger and the shark. There's no God. So just do whatever feels good, whatever's right in your own eyes. I mean, choose, it's kind of the old Deuteronomy thing, right? You have blessings or curses in front of you. Choose which one you want. You do it God's way, you get the blessings. You do it, Satan's way, you get the curses. And we're given that choice in America. Most people who ever lived on the planet didn't get that choice. And we as Christians have the right, just like our non-Christian neighbors and fellow countrymen, we have a right to influence the culture and choose leaders that reflect a biblical worldview. And man, John, I could give you quote after quote after quote of the founding fathers saying, choose biblical leaders. It's just like Exodus 18:21. Choose out from among you leaders of tens, 50s, hundreds, thousands. That's a Republican form of government, local, state, federal. But then they said, you're supposed to choose able men such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. So we have a clear biblical command for the kinds of leaders that we should choose. And you're right. I want power. I want us to have power to influence what's going on. That's a proper use of the talents that we've been given. Rather than burying them, we should absolutely use them so that our neighbors benefit, because the Muslim benefits, the atheist benefits, the secularist benefits, everybody in the community benefits when we do it God's way, because his way is not only right, it works best.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that you believe, and I believe for sure, that actually Christian leaders with a Christian worldview who love the law of God, who love the ethical commands of Christ, the Bible, all right?
Yeah.
Sounds like you're saying you think that those leaders will produce more freedom and more liberty and more goodness and more just scales, if you will, that treats the poor person just the same as the rich person. You think that Christian leaders will do that better than non-Christian leaders. You think that, and do you believe, as I do, that there is a trend in Christianity that does not believe that?
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's not just that we think it, right? World history proves it. There again, garbage in, garbage out, good stuff in, good stuff out. Biblical values and a biblical worldview benefits everybody, whether it's education, economy, justice. What you just mentioned is biblical justice rather than social justice. If you have biblical justice, then you have blind justice. You have equal justice. Everybody's treated the same. We're watching right now in our nation what happens when you remove the biblical worldview people who want blind justice and equal justice, and you bring in people that believe in using power to benefit yourself, to persecute your political enemies. And now we have this two-tier justice. Really, Tim Barton, who I work with, and you've had on before, he calls it a multi-tier justice system. But it's literally at the point where the justice system, supposedly justice, is persecuting political enemies, whether they do right or wrong, and then, turning a blind eye to political friends. And we're literally calling good evil and calling evil good. And that's the difference when you have biblical worldview folks in charge versus when you have non-biblical worldview folks in charge. There's no doubt that it makes a difference. And then to your second point, yeah, I think there's a lot of people in the church now, they really do think that somehow if you get involved and you go out there to be a good citizen and influence what's going on at your school board or your city council or your neighborhood or whatever, that somehow it's going to corrupt you. It's the same. It's the same as people that say, well, the guns are the problem. This inanimate plastic object is what's causing everything. Well, John, I can put my 1911 45 caliber up here and we could have a whole crowd stand around it and chant all day long. It's not going to jump up and shoot anybody. It's an inanimate object. Government's the same way. It's a vehicle. And if good people are leading the way, nobody's righteous, nobody's perfect. But if people that are trying to do good are leading the way, it's going to be a blessing. If you got bad people and you let government get outside its jurisdictions, man, it becomes a curse. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And it goes back to that civic and biblical ignorance. We don't know the proper role of government. We don't know the proper role of the Christian citizen. We need to know from a biblical perspective, how am I supposed to do this? How do I do Caesar well? How do I live out my citizenship in a way that honors God and that's going to benefit my neighbor? Charles Finney was a guy in the Second Great Awakening that said that how we do government is just part of a religion in a country such as this, and Christians must do their duty to their country as a part of their duty to God. God will bless or curse this nation according to the course Christians take in politics. And all he's saying is politics is just like work. It's just like family. It's just like everything else. It's just part of a religion in a country such as this. Because we're in charge, we just live out our faith. We live out our biblical worldview in our work, in our family, in our neighborhood, and in the way we form our society. And then God will bless the culture as a result of that if we're being salt and light.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It seems to me sometimes that our, I don't want to use the word enemies, but people on the opposite side of us, all right? So people who really don't like America, they think America is an oppressive place. they tend to also think that Christianity is oppressive as well, right? And
Yeah.
so it seems that to them, they seem to have a better understanding of the conjoining, if you will, of Christianity and the American Constitution, the American founding. They seem to understand that the things kind of go together, and to tear down one, you kind of need to tear down the other. At the same time, as it does seem like a lot of Christians are, not necessarily say a lot, but there's a rising amount of Christians who are sort of like that. This is kind of basically, I think it's kind of rooted in a lot of Christians that are kind of like, I don't think America is good. They don't recognize that the Constitution is somewhat a product of a Christian worldview. Without the Christian worldview, you wouldn't have the Constitution. So I'm not sure that they want to. What's the scripture you said at the beginning, to look back and remember what
Oh yeah,
so,
remember the former days.
remember
Yeah.
the former. I don't know if they really want to. I think they're like, I don't want to remember those former days when we were,
Right.
the imperialistic European people came and ruined everything. I think that they've kind of bought into that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure they understand that if you throw away the Constitution, if you tear down America, you might not know what you're about to get into, man.
No doubt, man. No doubt. Ronald Reagan said, if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. And that's why he said it's not just patriotism. It's not just, you don't just wave the flag to wave the flag. You have to have an understanding of why that flag is worthy of waving. It's not worship of the flag. It's not worship of America. It's just recognizing that this particular system of government, these political and economic structures, produce the best result any nation has ever produced ever in history. Most powerful, most free, the wealthiest, and the most benevolent. And that's, but if you don't know those stories, if you don't think about the things that America did, I mean, John, we're the only people in history ever to hold a technological advantage in war and not use it for conquest. Every time in history, if you created a gun, created some advantage, you started attacking your neighbors and conquering. 1945, we have the bomb, no one else. We could have controlled the entire planet. We dropped the first one. They still won't surrender. Give them 3 more days. Drop the second one. They finally surrender. And then we could have said to the world, hey, look what we just did. You all have to be our slaves. And we could have turned the whole world. Instead, we took our money and we went and rebuilt the nations that had attacked us. And we didn't ask for anything in return. I mean, that's different. And I'm not worshiping America. I'm just saying, why would we do that? We have to look at that output and say, what was the formula, the input that caused us to do things differently? And it's the belief that freedom is not something that is just innate within us. I don't give it to you. You don't give it to me. It comes from God. And we have a responsibility to live it out, respecting his authority, and a responsibility to try to export it as best we can. And I love what you said. I'm sorry for filibustering here, but I love what you said. The other side knows that the foundations and the formula of America is biblically based. They know that. And so they know if they want to tear down America, they have to separate biblical values from that American formula in order to remake it into a Marxist, a utopia is what they're after. And then our side doesn't realize how important the biblical values are. And so they're like, yeah, I can be a good patriot without God in the equation or talking about the Bible. George Washington said, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism that would subvert the great pillars of religion and morality, that they are indispensable supports of political prosperity. You're not going to be prosperous as a nation politically and have freedom and all those things if you don't have religion and morality at the heart of it. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on tangents, but man, you're so right. We need to know what the others are. There's a reason they're attacking that part. There's a reason they had for 60 years have been trying to remove God from the equation. Ingle v. Vitale, no voluntary prayer in school. Abington v. Shemp, Murray v. Collette, no more Bible in our schools. No 10 Commandments in 1980. The case was called Stoneby Grant. I mean, it's just been chipping away, pushing God out of the equation so that they can bring in this Marxist formula. And if we sit back and let them do it, we're done. But if we stand up and say, no, there's a better way, people are experiencing the pain of inflation and all these things. All of that comes from not knowing who we are and not knowing the formula. We can restore the formula and we can restore the good outcomes. It's going to take hard work, but we got to get the intellectual ammunition first.
I love that Washington quote. That's fantastic. That's the conservatism that we Christians need to go back to. Right. I really, and speaking of that,
he was watching, I'm so sorry, man. I keep
don't hit me.
He was watching the French Revolution when he gave that speech. This was his farewell address. And he's going, why are they messing up? They want the same thing. They want freedom. We wanted freedom. What's different? And then he looks at it really close and he goes, okay, I see what's different. freedom in America comes from God, lived out with respect for authority, for his authority. French Revolution was all about, oh no, I'm just innate with freedom, and it's law of the tiger and the shark. Whoever has the power uses the guillotine to get rid of, he noticed the difference was God. The difference was believing that there was an entity that gave us that freedom, and then putting those biblical values into the culture. And the founders were, man, I mean, I know you know this, but most people don't. I mean, they were 95% outspoken Christians. There's a handful that were, not what we would define as a deist today, and a watchmaker God wasn't involved. Even Franklin, not a Christian, believed God was involved. So they believed God was involved. But there was about 10 guys out of 250 that weren't Bible-believing Christians. That leaves 95%. So as you said, it was kind of as one historian said, the atmosphere they were breathing. So it just kind of was infused in everything they did. So I can show you clause after clause after clause in the Constitution and the Declaration that they said was traced directly to Scripture. Even separation of powers comes from Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is evil, no man can know it. Let's don't give it. So there's no doubt that biblical foundation is there, but the other side has been actually successful at trying to, get it out of our American equation.
It's always bad when the people opposing you believe what they believe more what we're supposed to believe, if you will. Like
they know their enemy, right?
Yeah,
they studied their enemy, so they know how to. Yeah.
They know their enemy more than we know ourselves. They're like,
Yes.
yeah, we got to tear down Christianity. At the same time, we're like, no, you don't have to. No, you
Right.
don't have to. Let's just be nice. I got this
And
quote.
convince us that we shouldn't stand up for it, right? You Christian nationalists, you
Yeah.
dominionists, or whatever other name they can come up with, so that we'll go, no, we're just nice. We're just being nice. We're just petting lambs all day. Don't worry. Man, they found a winning formula. It neutered half the church.
It really did, and I'm off subject, but you said Ronald Reagan, and my brother sent me this quote last night. I have to read it. Communism works only in heaven where they don't need it, and in hell where they already have it.
That's so good, man.
I
He was a master at that stuff, man. His quips, oh my gosh. I have a whole CD of just Reagan jokes. He was just so good at it. I named a kid after him. I liked it so much.
Oh my gosh, in hell where they have it. Okay. So, all right, I want to jump from this then.
Sure.
Now that we're talking about the Constitution, I want to talk about the abortion thing. I mean, I made a joke earlier about, we're only 2 years from the election. I make the joke only 2 years because now it's like every year is election year, basically,
Right.
But this is a really big thing. There's kind of a battle happening that I'm just going to be honest, I don't fully understand. I've talked to a lot of people. So I don't want to say in the anti-abortion movement, okay, there's the pro-life movement. You have the abolitionist movement, and am I forgetting anything? they sometimes they call it incrementalist.
Yeah, that's what I was exactly what I was going to say. There's the incremental, if you get everything you can today and just keep moving that direction. Yeah.
Okay. And I know, I just want to say from the get that I just know awesome people, I think, that would fit into each one of those categories. Amen. I really do.
Agreed.
So doesn't mean that we don't need to have opinions on it, but I'm sort of like, hey, sometimes we're same team here.
It's just strategy differences, right? It's like, tactical, strategy differences.
It seems that way, but I do have some friends that have said, hey, you need to read this. And as I've read it, it does seem like at times there are people in the pro-life movement that do seem to are kind of, what's the word? Reneging, I guess you might call it, almost like
backing off. Yeah, no, you're
backing
right.
off, and so
they're afraid of success.
It seems that way. Can
take
you
the W, and instead they're like, "Oh, we're sorry, we won that Supreme Court case. We're so no, you're right. Yeah.
So what's that about? It almost seems like we have a chance to kind of take the ball forward, if you will. Right. And what it seems like a lot of people saying, okay, wait a minute. We kept saying that we wanted abortion gone, but now it sounds too extreme to say it. And I don't understand what's going on. Maybe you can explain it.
Man, I honestly, I don't understand it because these are people that have in many ways dedicated their life to the movement and trying to end abortion and end this scourge from America. And then when we get the biggest victory of my lifetime on the life issue, and I was a legislator, man, we couldn't even get, when I was in the House, the best we could get was parental notification. Like it wasn't even parental consent. It wasn't like you had to have your parents' consent. They just got a letter that you were having an abortion. You just had to be noted. That was the best we could do 20 years ago when I was in the House. And now here we are on the cusp of ending abortion. I actually did end abortion in a lot of states as a result of Dobbs and the result of a lot of incrementalism. I mean, even before Dobbs here in Texas, we'd gotten parental consent, we'd gotten informed consent, we had the heartbeat bill that my buddy Brian Hughes did. I mean, there was a lot of victories over the years. And then it was almost like, oh wait, we're gonna scare people off, or we're gonna make people feel like we're being mean, or what. I don't even get that. It's like we should be not doing a victory lap, not rubbing it in people's faces, but actually saying, hey, God bless America. We're finally having laws that reflect a biblical worldview and that are protecting the innocent, and we should keep pressing that advantage and expand to as many states as we possibly can. So I don't get the ones that are just literally afraid to move forward whenever God's handing us a victory. It's like he's literally saying, okay, I've allowed you to take that ground, now take more ground. If we were the children of Israel and we were taking the promised land, he gave it to them incrementally, but they didn't stop just because they'd gotten some land. They kept going. We need to be like Caleb and say, man, give me that toughest mountain and let's keep going in. But that's just goes back to that wimpy Christianity. I'm not trying to insult people. I'm just saying you don't have the whole counsel of the gospel. You're literally picking and choosing these things because you want to be loved, you want to be liked. It's actually, in my opinion, it's selfishness and sinfulness and pride that we want people to like us instead of saying, Jesus said they were going to hate us. Let's deal with that and don't have to be jerks about it, but we should keep standing for truth and moving forward. We can do that in love. We can do that in a persuasive way, but sometimes love is tough. This redefinition of love that says, show me a scripture that says you got to be nice. I know we're supposed to be kind, but sometimes kind is tough. And so man, that's a long way of saying
interesting. Yeah.
I don't get where they're coming from. I think we need to be pressing our advantage. Doesn't mean we can get it all. Right now, I would love for Dobbs to have been, end abortion completely and protect innocent life. But there was no way politically that would have lasted, or that it wouldn't have sparked maybe a civil war. I mean, I think Alito did everything that he could. I think when you look at what Alito and Thomas have been doing for the last 2 years, man, it's beautiful. I don't want to nerd out on you here on the legal stuff, but those decisions, Dobbs, the Bruin case on the Second Amendment, the Kennedy case on religious liberty, the last summer was the summer of love, if you love the Constitution, because they were tearing down the strongholds that the left had built up through the courts to change our country dramatically. They didn't change it through elections. They didn't change it through the elected representatives. They misused the court in a way that the founders never envisioned it should be. And that's how Alito does that Dobbs decision. He says, we've been doing things we did not have the constitutional authority to do. And what we're about to do is take our hands off and push it back to the states. And that was the most that he could do. And look at how many states now have completely ended abortion and how many babies have been saved as a result of it. So it was a big victory, not only for life, but for restoring the rule of law and restoring the proper role of the court. The court's been making up all these substantive due process, all these big fancy words and big fancy tests, the Lemon test on religious liberty. All that stuff is getting torn down and washed away. They're writing opinions we can actually understand, and they're actually talking about the basic principles of liberty and the history of America, that there was no, abortion didn't have some place in American history. And it started, there was no state that wanted this. 3/4 of the states had already had punishments for it. The common law, all of this was in the last century, last part of the 20th century, where all this stuff came about. And so thank God for Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and the fact that they are tearing down all of that. And it's going to take time. It's not that we're winning on every issue, but those were big victories for us.
And can you speak to, you just said something about 3/4 of the state. So prior to 1972, which is Roe, right?
Yeah.
Prior to that, what was the popularity of abortion in the various states? Can you speak to that very quick?
Yeah, there was no state that said you legally can have an abortion. And the common law, which a lot of states relied on and didn't actually have statutes with punishments for abortion, but the common law still said you couldn't have abortion. And so what Alito points out at the beginning of the Dobbs case is, we lied to you. We literally lied to you as a court in 72 and 73. And we made it sound like there was some rich history of abortion in this country in order to cram through this substantive due process in the 14th Amendment. This was how they kind of, literally stood on one leg, kind of with a certain angle. You could maybe see a right to abortion in the Constitution. They literally made it up. and they came up with all this stuff to do so. And what Alito did was he laid out all the history. He said, here's where it was in every state, how it worked, and where we were in 72. And this was a drastic change in American history. And all we're doing 50 years later is correcting what the court did and going back to what it was in 72. And the states are going to have to, that's when we have a fight in every state now. Right now we're having to fight for life in every state legislature. And unfortunately, you got California and some of these left-wing states that are doing even worse, right? They're going even worse than what Roe did, because Roe at least limited, and there were some decisions that limited abortion in some ways. Now they're going full-fledged baby murder up until, right before the baby is born. So those states, man, the churches are going to have to stand up. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. This is going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be kind of like slavery, where it took decades and decades and changing hearts and minds. And then ultimately, in that case, it took a war. I don't think that's what it's going to take here. I hope not. But it is going to take time to win hearts and minds. And there's going to be a few states where they probably will have abortion right up until birth. And it's child sacrifice, but and it's happening on our watch.
So what I want to ask you about, I'm in over my head. Okay. So, I don't even know if you'll even be able to understand what I'm saying, but I do want to do a little bit of conflating between slavery and abortion, because there's a couple things I don't understand. So you just mentioned it. So one of my questions for you is going to be this. A lot of conservatives say, it's good they've turned this back because the states always should have had that decision. And this is my question and what I don't understand. So I'm not too good with understanding federalism and yada, yada, yada. So the federal law is going to protect things, well, like murders, right? So that's not just a state by state thing. So why do we want abortion to be a state by state thing? Why wouldn't we want federal law to be against it? So it's the opposite of Roe. Why is it better to have it in the states?
Well, and I'm not necessarily saying it's better. I'm saying it's the best we can do at this point. Just like the founders, when they did the Constitution, they said we can't get rid of slavery yet because we'll split as a nation. There's no way we'll be able to get a unanimous vote. Even in Jefferson's Declaration, his first draft of the Declaration, man, he lambasted slavery. And South Carolina and Georgia refused to sign on unless it was taken out. So they amended it at that point. And then with the Constitution, they said, we're going to get rid of it within a generation. And what most people don't know today is that we were the first nation to ban the slave trade. We beat England by 3 weeks. And then we were the fourth nation to end slavery completely. Had to fight a war, 600,000 casualties, all that. But we were only the fourth nation on the planet. Every nation on the planet had slavery in 1776, black on black, black on white, white on black, white on red. I mean, every color of skin you can think of. It wasn't even about color of skin as much as it was who could be captured and sell. You had black slave owners in America. So there's an interesting, a lot more to that than what we typically know today. And that's how they created this division, making us hate each other. Because again, we don't know what we did, so we don't know who we are, as Reagan said. But anyway, let me just chunk up a minute and just say, from a big picture on all issues, federalism, because you mentioned it. It's so important. This is the key to saving the country. I don't believe we will keep America together if we don't restore federalism. And the concept of federalism is very simple. 50 different states. At their time, it was 13, of course, but today, 50 different states that are very unique and that for most things decide for themselves. And the Constitution only gives to the federal government 17 specific things. So we are united as a nation, and we will have a common law across the nation on only very specific things. We come together for war, we come together for commerce, and there are some things that are so evil, we'll say you can't do that in your state if you want to be a part of this nation. And sometimes that's fungible. Sometimes that changes, which is why we have amendments to the Constitution to say, you know what, this is something that we don't want to allow in our whole nation. In fact, prohibition, the 18th Amendment, was basically saying, okay, Congressman, we got a rampant alcoholism in the country. We want to change this. And Congress said, we can't change it. We can't outlaw alcohol. It's not in the Constitution. The federal government has nothing to do with it. You want to end that in Texas? You want to end that in Arkansas? You can do that, but we can't do it. And so we had an amendment to the Constitution that opened up the powers of the federal government and increased their powers by one and gave them the power to ban alcohol. Prohibition didn't work out. So we come back with the 21st Amendment and say, we don't like that. We're taking that power back from you. So federalism is just simply the federal government only does a few things in order to keep us together as a nation. Everything else, like the 10th Amendment says, is left to the states and the people. Now, one rabbit trail that I'll go down and nerd out on you for a little bit. The Constitution originally did not protect you from the state doing certain things to you. It was only to prevent the federal government from doing certain things to you. And so states could actually violate your Second Amendment rights. If they didn't want to allow you to carry a gun in public places prior to the 14th Amendment, they could do that. The Second Amendment was only protecting you from federal laws that would come after your Second Amendment rights or your freedom of religion or all of these things. The 14th Amendment is what changed that and said, no, you know what? Everybody in America should have their constitutional rights protected. So whatever's listed in the Constitution, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, right to keep and bear arms, those kind of things, that we're going to make sure that all 50 states have the same protection on those things. Didn't include abortion, didn't include these things that people came up with out of thin air. So now what we've done over the last 80 years is the courts have given more and more power to the federal government. We didn't amend the Constitution to expand the federal government, but the federal government expanded itself. And so now it micromanages everything. Here's why that's such a big problem, because whoever gets elected president or whoever has control of the DOJ and the FBI or other agencies, they are now using the force of the federal government to make every state the same. You got a San Francisco cabal that is running Washington, D.C. and saying to you in Wisconsin or here in Texas, you're going to let men go into the girls' locker room or the girls' bathroom because we say you have to do it, even if your state doesn't want to allow for that. That type of thing, the Constitution, are you kidding me? The federal government is going to force it? That's crazy. So all this transgender stuff, so many issues that the federal government is doing that's outside its purview. If we can get them back inside their box and say, listen, California is different from Texas, different from Wisconsin, let everybody be different, and we're only going to come together on these major 17 things. And if we want to add some things, if we want to say certain things are so bad we don't want to allow them in these, then we need to do an amendment to the Constitution to do that. That was a really long, Constitution lesson on federalism, just to say, I don't think we can save the country if we don't restore federalism and get the feds out of our business and then let people vote with their feet. If they want to be goofy and they want to go off to California and live under some crazy laws, let them do that, and let the people of California have a battle over that, and let the churches in California stand up and say no to that and eventually stop it. But don't let them come to Texas or go to Wisconsin and make us live in fantasy land with them, because I can't live with people that want to carve up kids in my neighborhood. I can't live with people that want to live in this kind of fantasy land. As you said on your special edition this week with these, sisters of the perpetual indulgence, I'm not going to live in a world like that, man. I'm not going to let that stuff be in the public square for my children. And so I want to live in a state where I can outlaw that stuff, where we can say no drag queen shows for kids, no men and girls sports, and the federal government should not be able to come in and make us do that. All right, I'm sorry, I don't even remember what your question was.
Hey, that's exactly what I wanted. That's exactly, yeah. You know what? I absolutely agree with you, and my understanding of federalism is very, very small, but I've understood it enough to sort of get that, and I totally agree. And I think that's the way the kingdom of God works too. It starts as a seed, right? And the seed grows and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. And if we want to affect our cities for the kingdom of God, I mean, it's going to be a lot easier to affect my city where I go, where my church is, where I do my thing with my family and your family, and all of our families at church. And then we're growing and growing in influence rather than a whole federal thing. But here's my question. So what I don't understand is that, so if we go back to slavery, the Confederate argument, if I've understood it, seemed to be, hey, federal government, you don't have any business telling us what to do with slavery. Right. So in an ideal world, in Rick Green's ideal world, that would not be a state issue. That would be a federal law, because that is part of rights, correct? Rights, God-given rights.
That's right, because as the Declaration would say it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's a fundamental human right of liberty that a state does not have the right to violate if they want to be a part of this union. And that was a major, philosophical change, right? And that was one of the big differences between the North and the South. Was the South would say states' rights, and we would, then the question would be, right to do what? To have slavery. Well, no, we don't want you to have the right to enslave another man or a woman. And we would say the same thing, right? We don't want a state to have the right to murder an innocent child. Absolutely. I think it should be outlawed for the whole country. But again, we're in this political quagmire where there's no way to get enough states. You need 38 states to ratify an amendment to the Constitution, and there's no way to get 38 states to ratify that yet. And so we're going to have to. It's kind of like in war. You got to pick your battles and say, we're going to take this ground. We're going to solidify this ground. We're going to make sure we're really strong behind these lines, and then we'll advance, and then we'll move forward. That's, in my mind, strategically what we have to do. I think that's the way the founders saw it too on the slavery issue. I wish they had outlawed it from the beginning. I wish we could outlaw abortion completely in the entire country, but I just don't see how politically we're going to get there right away. I do think the good thing is these kids coming up behind us, man, they are more pro-life than ever. And a lot of it's because if you're born after 1972, you kind of start going, wait a minute, that could have been me. And you start realizing, and now we got all these 4D images, and you see that the baby is a life. So I think there's a deception on a lot of people in the country, right? And I think that delusion will prevent them from seeing that as a life. But I do think the pro-life movement is growing with the young people. I work with young people all year long, and man, I'm seeing them get really passionate about this issue. So, my prayer is that we can win that in the next few years. And I'm not a doomsdayer, but I am a student of history, and we are approaching the 250-year mark for our nation. And we may end up splitting as a nation. I don't worship the United States of America. I want us to live in freedom. I love my country. I hope we live in freedom in the United States as it is. But it may be that at some point we say, you know what, we're so different, and we have such a different view of what life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is, that we do end up splitting as a nation. I hope not. I hope there's a revival in America. And I know there's, thousands of churches in all of these blue states that do speak truth and that do want to be salt and light. And so I go to Washington State, super blue, right? Man, I've got people doing my class on biblical citizenship right now. 500 people coming to the class in Seattle. I mean, wow. If that's happening, I'm going, okay, God, what are you doing? You're wanting people in even these blue areas to say, here, my Lord, send me. I'm going to stand firm. I'm going to rebuild the wall like in Nehemiah right here where I live. Because you nailed it, man. The more you can do locally, you're not going to change a whole lot at the federal level, but you can change what's happening in your neighborhood. You can run for school board or get somebody good elected. You can run for city council or water district or whatever. We've got to think locally, like in the book of Nehemiah, and then expand out from there.
That's great. And, I've got several friends in the abolitionist movement, and, they all kind of said when Roe got overturned last year, they're like, this is great because that was an impediment to us getting the next victory. Like, so now the real work starts, that's a miracle. Great. Now we can begin to try to go state by state. And
we need those guys. We need those guys.
Yeah.
I'm probably more of an incrementalist and strategist in that way, but we need all these different players, just like with slavery, man. There were those that were saying you're evil for being an incrementalist. We need to end this thing right now. And then there were people like Wilberforce that were willing to, like in the movie, remember in Amazing Grace, where he steers that ship or that little boat over to the slave ship, and all those fancy people are in their dresses and all that, and they got to smell the stench and the disease, the death, and it gets in their nostrils, and they're like, wow, that's what slavery is. I think these guys and gals in the abolitionist movement that put the evil of abortion in the face of Americans, I think we need that. You have to wake people up. Same thing with all the transgender stuff. I didn't even realize until the last couple of weeks, some of the stuff I've been seeing on social media, what they do to these kids and what they do to these people. It is disgusting, awful, and can't be reversed. And the fact that they're doing that, people need to know that this is not just, hey, let everybody love who they want to love. This is the absolute destruction of the human body, the absolute shaking the fist in God's face and saying, we don't care how you created us. We're going to destroy what you created. We have to have that in your face side of it too. Yeah. And then the, little bit nicer strategy coming from other people. It takes all of us, man. It takes all of us.
I hear you. And, I totally agree. I've said to my wife several times, like, if I had the worst human being ever on planet, Hitler, if Hitler was here, okay, the worst people ever, you would not torture your enemies in the way that they are doing these trans surgeries. It's too horrific it's just like, it's the worst nightmare ever, and we are doing it to the sound of applause. I can't. Anyway, I don't have time for that.
And they're broken people, and for anyone in the church to stand up and say that the proper biblical response is to let you be you when you're broken, and you're now going to do some things that are permanent in that brokenness, and you're going to make them even more broken. To me, I'm just like, man, you talk about a millstone tied around your neck. We should be saying, we should be serving these people in a way that actually brings them out of their brokenness instead of forcing them into their I just cannot believe how the church, some of the church is responding to this. It just boggles the mind. Man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, talk about meaning, talk about why you were created, identity. It's not what it's not what these people are, they're lying to you. That's not what identity is. You know, you're created for a purpose, and the physical world is real. Your body matters. Okay. So, you know, you touched on something that I just want to, I think maybe a good way to end. You were basically saying, how are you saying it? Oh yeah. So we're talking about federalism. Sorry. We're rewinding now, going back. And so what you're saying is this is a great worldview lesson. If you have people, I really wish that we would teach this stuff in churches these days. If you have two different people with a completely different worldview, and they both say, hey, I agree with federalism, let's only limit this certain kind of thing. Well, you may have Rick Green on one side saying, hey, because I believe in individual rights, the human dignity and worth of all people, then I think, like, you know, the abolition of slavery and abortion, that should be a federal law, of course, right? But what people don't understand is if people are in a totally other worldview, they want to do what we just had, which was we want a right to abortion enshrined in the federal law. So we are actually very much at loggerheads. It's not as I guess why I'm saying this is because I have a lot of Christian friends who are basically like, John, everybody just needs to quit the culture war. Everybody needs to calm down, because in the end, we all kind of agree on most everything. And I'm like, no, we don't. The abortion issue is the best example, don't you think?
Right. Well, that and the transgenderism issue, right? Like, it's in our face right now. And it may end up being that the transgender issue is what ultimately wakes up enough of the church for us to start winning the culture war. I really feel like there's all these people that were in the middle and not involved, and it wasn't that bad. Now all of a sudden they're going, wait a minute, you're going after the kids now with this stuff. I'm finally awake and I'm willing to do something. But back to your point on federalism. Yeah. I mean, we're at loggerheads. I mean, there's just no way to get that super majority that is necessary to make a federal law that applies to everybody in the country. And I don't want them forcing on us their perspective that we should allow abortion of and so that's why I'm willing to say, for now, let them decide in their particular state. And I think it's funny, John, after all those Supreme Court decisions last summer, you had all these people in California and Massachusetts and elsewhere saying, wait a minute, we don't want the Supreme Court telling us what to do. And I was like, welcome to the party, baby. We've been saying that for 50 years. It's about time we didn't have the Supreme Court telling us what to do. So
John McClane, welcome to the party, pal. Remember when he throws the body out of the window and it lands on the guy's car? Never mind. It's from Die Hard. Everybody,
Die Hard, of course, man. Of course.
No, I totally agree.
The best Christmas movie ever, right?
Yes. It is the best Christmas movie ever. So let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. I just said I was going to end, but now I've got you, and I'm curious what you think. I've heard a lot of conservatives, even on conservative TV and stuff. A lot of them are saying that the reason we lost the midterms is because of Roe. So Roe gets overturned. All of a sudden, abortion is in question. The left is freaking out, and that gives them a lot of juice. And because of that, I'm hearing conservatives now, even some people that I have typically listened to, not necessarily Christians though, okay? So I'm not talking about this. I don't know if they are or not, but they're just known as political commentators, basically saying, okay, Rick, Cooper stuff, the way we need to go about this is to not be so extreme or on abortion, or we're not going to win.
Right.
And I'm asking you well, I know that you don't agree with that. I'm imagining, but I'm curious if in other words, I don't agree with that morally, but I'm curious if you agree with that politically. Do you see what I'm getting at?
No, not at all. And I think the data proves they're wrong. You know, I think when Trump came out and said this, you know, it was, he literally, he lost a lot of support because of it, and he started blaming it on the pro-lifers. And you're going, wait a minute, if that's true, then why Virginia? Why Florida? Right? Look at both of the victories there for the pro-life, solid pro-life Republicans that ran there. Why did Florida go so far Republican and give Ron DeSantis this massive victory where the legislature there in Florida had just passed all these pro-life laws? I mean, I just can't imagine how I mean, where does he even get that kind of data? But that's also, man, that's what the consultants have said forever. They told me that 25 years ago when I was running the first time. Don't talk about pro-life. You can be pro-life, but just don't talk about it because you'll lose votes and the polling and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Man, I'm telling you, the more people stand up and say, I'm for this. This is where I stand. This is who I am. They're transparent. They're blunt about it. People are drawn to that. They are sick of these mealy mouth, talk out of both sides of their mask politicians, and they're looking for people that will actually say, this is what I believe. And if people vote me in, great. And if they don't, then I'm not supposed to be the representative for these people because what I believe is not the majority view of this area. And honestly, that's what you got from Trump for the first 4 years. That's what you're getting from DeSantis and others. But man, this backpedaling on the life issue, huge mistake on Trump's part. And now to go after Kayleigh McEnany and all these people, I mean, I'm telling you, he's making huge mistakes. But for us in the pro-life movement, it's not about a particular person. It's about the principles. And we're going to stand for the principles. I don't care which party. It's not about party. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's what does the Bible say? And then which party best represents those biblical perspectives and which candidate best represents them. And I'll say to all your listeners, you're never going to find a perfect candidate. I've never found a candidate I agree with 100%. I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time. You're always going to have to say, yes, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils, because unless Jesus Christ is on the ballot, every candidate is a flawed jar of clay. They're all broken, none righteous, no, not one. So you just do the best you can with what you got where you are. You stay in the fight. You do what you're supposed to do. You do your duty. And as John Quincy Adams said, do your duty and leave the results up to God. That's the way we have to operate as Christians.
I agree. I love it. That's a great word. As we are ending, tell people what you want to tell people, where to find you. Where can they take these Constitution classes?
Man, anywhere. In fact, you'll love this, John. We've got these classes going in living rooms, churches, Harley-Davidson dealerships, bait and tackle shops. I mean, I could go on and on and on, all the places this is happening all across the country. It's really cool to watch. It's free. We give it away for free. Go to patriotacademy.com, sign up as a coach for free. You don't have to know anything about the law or history, or you don't have to be an expert at all. Don't worry about, everybody thinks, I don't want to be a coach because they'll ask me a question I don't know. No. The videos bring the expertise. Kirk Cameron teaches the monument. David Barton gives truth and courage in the founders. Tim Barton does a response to the 1619 Project. Rabbi Daniel Lappin, I mean, all these people. So it's free. It's really good training. And John, it's good fellowship. I'm telling you, we got to build community. We got to be saturated in God's word so we know truth and we'll recognize the lie. And then we got to build community, find people we can assemble with, just like you were describing earlier, so that we can look around the room and go, I'm not alone. There's other people that care about this. And then we just do what we're told to do, tend the garden. Tend the garden right there in your backyard. Start pulling up those weeds. Start making sure that once again, those principles of liberty are alive and well in your neighborhood. So patriotacademy.com. You can come to our campus in Fredericksburg. We're building a campus right now. We even do handgun defense, man. If you want to do a constitutional defense course, you get the intellectual ammunition of the Second Amendment, but you also learn how to defend your family, because crime is crazy right now in this country, and everybody needs to be able to do that. Proverbs 27:12. The fool walks blindly on and suffers the consequences. The wise person foresees danger and takes precaution. So anyway, that's my commercial, patriotacademy.com.
Are you guys going to do one of these things in Target? We may need to set some up in Target, big booth.
The answer is no, because we won't step foot in there. But I'll say this, my friend Heidi St. John, I was just at a convention with her. I don't know if you know Heidi or not, but she's fantastic. She said, you watch. She said, I'm predicting it. Target's going to go bankrupt. They're going to have these empty stores all over the country. We're going to take over those stores and build huge homeschool resource centers and pro-life centers. We're going to take what the enemy built up. It's going to go to the righteous. So I'm just saying, man, let's bankrupt them.
I like the sound of that. Thanks so much for joining me today, Rick. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and we'll see everybody next time.
Read the Bible.
Kill myself. I'm in the game.